Okay, so let's continue. Let's continue with the CTMU work, right? I'm trying to make a sum up of the main theory behind the man known as Chris Langan, which is supposedly a very smart man with an IQ of, I believe, to be 200 points. So that's really impressive, because the standard IQ, I believe, is to be within the range of 160 and 40. And what I read about it is that Chris Langan managed to do a military IQ test, and he commented that he was really curious to know how smart he was compared to other people, because that is what an IQ measure is, right? It's a comparison between people, and 100 points of IQ is supposed to represent the median. It's not the average, it's the median. If you don't know the difference, I recommend you to look it up. So it seems we're back on the job. A sum up of the CTMU and also STSPL, which is self-constructed, self-processing language, I believe. So I'm cooking a sum up, and some of those ideas are already familiar to me. I'm lucky enough to have some kind of insight into reality, and I have somewhat the same thing that was described by Langan as a monomaniac about the nature of reality, and I had that really early on, and I had a concept of reality that's similar to that of a simulation, of a discrete digital simulation, and I started to program really early, and I was really interested in the problem solving to get working games and simulators. Mostly I was really interested in simulators, and one of the ideas that I'm already familiar with is the idea of non-continuity, the idea against the multiverse, the idea of a reality made of data, that is a reality that can be completely described with language, which is obvious to me, but some people would try to argue against, right? And a step further that direction is to think of a reality that is fundamentally built with bits. And that's not so familiar to me. I do believe it, but I would need to think more about that. So let's go on and keep on the reading. So I made a comment about Chris Langan supposedly lack of comment about an English philosopher that goes with the name of Berkeley, and it seems that he eventually mentions him, but I don't think he read enough about Berkeley, and I have a Berkeley's book right here, and so I have the portable Chris Langan book right now. It's on Kindle, so I can just take a minute to look for the Berkeley's book, which has a let me see. Yeah, it has a long title, A Treatise Concerning the Principles of Human Knowledge. And there's also the Works of George Berkeley, Volume 1 of 4. And I think I paid like less than $1 for each of these. So I'll just go ahead and take a look at the first one, A Treatise Concerning the Principles of Human Knowledge. And then I will move on to Langan's work. I will go to the beginning of the book because it's around 33%, and there is the preface. And let's start with that. Okay, so there is the preface, introduction of the principles. It's preface, introduction, and of the principles of human knowledge. I don't know if it's 2 or 3 items then. I can just click on it and find out. Yeah, it's 3 items, and it's the third one is of the principles of human knowledge. Maybe I should start with that. 1. Objects of human knowledge. That's the title. And it seems to have a weird format, by the way. It is evident to anyone who takes a survey of the objects of human knowledge that they are either ideas actually imprinted on the senses, or else such as are perceived by attending to the passions and operations of the mind, or lastly, ideas formed by help of memory and imagination. You can see that Berkeley sound like a really smart guy, and he was probably one of his kind. I think he lived in England. I don't know if he's Irish or something, but I don't think he was living on the continent. Ideas formed by help of memory and imagination, either compounding, dividing, or barely representing those originally perceived in the aforesaid ways. But by sight I have ideas of light and colors with their several degrees and variations. By touch I perceive hard and soft, heat and cold, motion and resistance, and all this more and less either as to quantity or degree. By the way, Berkeley is one of those who criticize the idea of continuity as well. So this is getting like, it seems there is a convergence of minds here. We three, me, Langan, and Berkeley, are all independently coming to the conclusion that continuity must be a mistake. I have to look more of that later, by the way. By sight I have ideas of light and colors with their several degrees and variations. By touch I perceive hard and soft. So he's saying that through the senses he is able to make an abstraction. So with the eyes he is able to abstract colors and all those degrees and variations of colors. By touch he is able to abstract hard and soft, heat and cold, motion and resistance, and all of these more or less either as to quantity or degree. Smelling furnishes me with odors, the palate with tastes, and hearing conveys sounds to the mind in all their variety of tone and composition. And as several of these are observed to accompany each other, they come to be marked by one name, and so to be reputed as one thing. Thus, for example, a certain color, taste, smell, figure, and consistency, having been observed to go together, are counted one distinct thing, signified by the name apple. Other collections of ideas constitute a stone, a tree, a book, and the like sensible things, which as they are pleasing or disagreeable excite the passions of love, hatred, joy, grief, and so forth. 2. Mind, spirit, soul. But besides all that endless variety of ideas or objects of knowledge, there is likewise something which knows or perceives them, and exercises divers operations, as willing, imagining, remembering about them. This specific active being is what I call mind, spirit, soul, or myself. So he has an idea that he has, the Greeks used to talk about soul very often. What annoying dog. And they had a word for mind too, and they also I don't know, I think they had a word for soul, a word for spirit, and another word for mind. And Berkeley seems to go ahead and call all the three the same. So mind, spirit, soul, or myself. That is that which doesn't correspond to the body, and that which enables you to die, right? So your body continues to exist and decomposes But the soul, the continuity of energy, I don't want to use the word continuity, the progress, the chemical progress that is the combustion inside the cells that leads to respiration, heart beatings, and everything else, that leads to the computation within the brain, and the whole organism working as a unit, that should be called the soul. And since that corresponds to some data, right, it can have a continuation if you have another medium that can copy and do the same data in the order that requires for the computation in the brain to be the same, the heart to be the same, and so on. By which words I do not denote any one of my ideas, but a thing entirely distinct from them, wherein they exist, or which is the same thing, whereby they are perceived, for the existence of an idea consists in being perceived. 3. How far the assent of the vulgar conceited, that neither our thoughts, nor passions, nor ideas formed by the imagination exist without the mind, is what everybody will allow. And it seems no less evident. This seems to be like some old English, and let me read that again, because it sounds weird to me. How far the assent of the vulgar conceited, that neither our thoughts, nor passions, nor ideas formed by the imagination exist without the mind, is what everybody will allow. I think allow is to understand in this sense, and it seems no less evident that the various sensations or ideas imprinted on the sense, however blended or combined together, that is, whatever objects they compose, cannot exist otherwise than in a mind perceiving them. I think an intuitive knowledge may be obtained of this by anyone that shall attend to what is meant by the term exist. And this book has a weird format, because some sentences here, like some parts of a sentence, have I don't know how to say it, it's all capitalized, and this was one of them. What is meant by the term exist? I think it's because probably the publisher is already worried about the reader not being able to easily understand, so I think they are directing the reader's focus here when applied to sensible things. The table I write on I say exists. The table I write on I say, the table I write on I say exists. That is, I see and feel it. And if I were out of my study, I should say it existed, meaning thereby that if I was in my study, I should say it exists. Sorry. Meaning if I was in my study, I might perceive it. Or that some other spirit actually does perceive it. There was another, that is, it was smelt. There was a sound, that is, it was heard. A color or figure, and it was perceived by sight or touch. This is all that I can understand by these and the like expressions. For as to what is said of his absolute existence of unthinking things without any relation to their being perceived, that seems perfectly unintelligible. Whereas is percepi, nor is it possible they should have any existence out of the minds or thinking things which perceive them. My voice is kind of weird today. Note first argument in support of the author's theory. For the vulgar opinion involves a contradiction. It is indeed an opinion strangely prevailing amongst men that houses, mountains, rivers, and in a word all sensible objects have an existence, natural or real, distinct from their being perceived by the understanding. But with how great an assurance and acquiescence soever this principle may be entertained in the world, yet whoever shall find in his heart to call it in question may, if I mistake not, perceive it to involve a manifest contradiction. For what are the forementioned objects but the things we perceive by sense? And what do we perceive besides our own ideas or sensations? And is it not plainly repugnant that any one of those any one of these or any combination of them should exist unperceived. So he's trying to establish that everything that exists in the material world is necessarily perceivable. 5. Because of this prevalent error, if we thoroughly examine this tenet, it will perhaps be found at bottom to depend on the doctrine of abstract ideas. For can there be a nicer string of abstraction than to distinguish the existence of sensible objects? Yeah, he calls everything that can be sensed by the senses, and everything that can be observed is by definition sensible objects, right? And from there being perceived so as to conceive them existing unperceived. Light and colors, heat and cold, extension and figures, in a word, the things we see and feel, what are they but so many sensations, notions and ideas or impressions on the sense? And is it possible to separate, even in thought, any of these from perception? For my part, I might as easily divide a thing from itself. I may indeed divide in my thoughts or conceive apart from each other those things which perhaps I never perceived by sense so divided. Thus I imagine the trunk of a human body without the limbs, or conceive the smell of a rose without thinking of the rose itself. So far, I will not deny I can abstract, if it may properly be called abstraction, which extends only to the conceiving separately such objects as it is possible may really exist or be actually perceived. Asunder. I don't know this word, asunder, A-S-U-N-D-E-R. But my conceiving or imagining power does not extend beyond the possibility of real existence or perception. Hence, as it is impossible for me to see or feel anything without an actual sensation of that thing, so is it impossible for me to conceive in my thoughts any sensible thing or object distinct from the sensation or perception of it. Note, in truth the object and the sensation are the same thing and cannot therefore be abstracted from each other. Some truths they are so near and obvious. Some truths there are so near and obvious to the mind that a man need only open his eyes to see them. Such I take this important one to be vice, that all the chore of heaven and furniture of the earth, in a word, all those bodies which compose the mighty frame of the world, have not any subsistence without a mind, that their being as existence, I don't know why they say as after being, and being is all capitalized, by the way. Being as, it probably means existence. That their existence it should be perceived or known. But consequently, so long as they are not actually perceived by me, or do not exist in my mind or that of any other created spirit, they must either have no existence at all, or else subsist in the mind of some eternal spirit, it being perfectly unintelligible and involving all the absurdity of abstraction, to attribute to any single part of them an existence independent of a spirit, to be convinced of which the reader need only reflect and try to separate in his own thoughts the being of a sensible thing from its being perceived. So Berkeley seems to go from the thread that in order for something to really exist, it needs to be perceived. It's not just it can be perceived. It seems that Berkeley thinks that something for you to know that something really exists, it needs to be perceived, right? And that's a very scientific perspective. So what about the things that you know exist but are away from your perception? And I guess that's his argument for a universal mind, right? And that's how he sees God, a mind. Okay. consequently, so long as they are not actually perceived by me, or do not exist in my mind or that of any other created spirit, they must either have no existence at all, or else subsist in the mind of some eternal spirit. So it's like a funny joke, right? Berkeley takes the scientific principle of observation to an extreme. It's not really an extreme, but it will sound like an extreme to people. But he takes it further, right? He basically tries to be consistent with it. Like, you either believe it or not. You either believe in science and truth from observation, and then if you really believe that, if you think about it, the meaning is that for things to exist, they need to be perceived. They're not just perceivable, but they need to be perceived. And I do mean perceived by the senses, by the way. Okay. And he has a very interesting way of making an argument. So this one is the first argument. The second one starts on this on 7. It says here 7. It's a very short book. Second argument. From what has been said, it follows there is not any other substance than spirit, or that which perceives, right? But for the fuller proof of this point, let it be considered the sensible qualities of color, figure, motion, smell, taste, etc., an example of ideas perceived by the sense. Now, for an idea to exist in an unperceiving thing is a manifest contradiction. To have an idea is all one as to perceive. That therefore, wherein color, figure, and the like qualities exist, must perceive them. Hence, it is clear there can be no unthinking substance or substratum of those ideas. 8. Objection. Okay, so that's the interesting part. He makes an argument and then he makes an objection, I guess. I think he's making an answer to the objection. I don't know. Answer, but say you, though the ideas themselves do not exist without the mind, yet there may be things like them, whereof they are copies or resemblance, which things exist without the mind in an unthinking substance. I answer, an idea can be like nothing but an idea. A color or figure can be like nothing but another color or figure. If we look but never so. Okay, let me try again. Never so little into our thoughts, we shall find it impossible for us to conceive a likeness except only between our ideas. Again, I ask whether those supposed originals or external things, of which our ideas are the pictures or representations. So this is the first time I'm reading this, and I'm getting a little confused here because I'm trying to understand it as I read, and my mind is just full of stuff right now. Be themselves perceivable or no? If they are, then they are ideas, and we have gained our point. But if you say they are not, I appeal to anyone, whether it be sense to assert a color is like something. And this old English doesn't help, right? So let's read that again. I appeal to anyone, whether it be sense to assert a color is like something which is invisible. Right? I hope you got that. This is Old English, hard or soft, like something which is intangible, and so of the rest. So the philosophical notion of matter involves a contradiction. Some there are who make a distinction between betwixt. What is make a distinction betwixt? I swear to you, it's written betwixt with betwixt. And I hope this means the same as between. Yeah, it probably does. Make a distinction between primary and secondary qualities. By the former, they mean extension, figure, motion, rest, solidity, or impenetrability, and number. By the latter, they denote all other sensible qualities as colors, sounds, tastes, and so forth. The ideas we have of these they acknowledge not to be the resemblance of anything existing without the mind, or unperceived. but they will have our ideas of a primary qualities to be patterns or images of things which exist without the mind, in an unthinking substance which they call matter. By matter, therefore, we have to understand an inert, senseless substance in which extension, figure, and emotion do actually subsist. But it is evident from what we have already shown that extension, figure, and motion are only ideas existing in the mind, and that an idea can be like nothing but another idea, and that consequently neither they nor their archetypes can exist in an unperceiving substance. Hence, it is plain that the very notion of what is called matter or corporeal substance involves a contradiction in it. So you can see, my point here is that Berkeley goes very deep into this. And it's fair to say that if Chris Langan does not acknowledge that Berkeley is going deep into this, I think Chris Langan is probably misled, right? Okay, so let's go to the part where Chris Langan will be mentioning Berkeley. This video will be a little longer than 20 minutes. I'm sorry. It was supposed to be only 20 minutes, but I guess that's my minimum. In Disposing of Mind, Hume made another salient contribution to reality theory. He attempted to dispose of causation by identifying it as a cognitive artifact, supporting his thesis with the problem of induction. The problem of induction states that because empirical induction entails a prior assumption of that which it seeks to establish, namely the uniformity of nature, science is circular and fundamentally flawed. The problem of induction is very real. It is manifest in Heisenberg uncertainty and the cosmic horizon problem. Finite limitations of scientific tools of microscopic and macroscopic observation, and is why no general theory of reality can ever be reliably constructed by the standard empirical methods of science. Unfortunately, many scientists have either dismissed this problem or quietly given up on the search for a truly general theory. In either case, serving the long-term interests of science. In fact, the problem of induction merely implies that a global theory of reality can only be established by the rational methods of mathematics, specifically including those of logic. In response to Berkeley, Hume Kant asserted that the unprimed cognition which remains when perceptual content is subtracted has intrinsic structure that exists prior to content. It comprises that a priori categories of perceptual or phenomenal reality. I'm having a problem with Langan's reference to language, right? I don't know what he means by language exactly. I have a very general. I thought I had a very general idea of what a language is, and I guess. But my hope is that Chris Langan is right when he goes really further on the definition of language, and he's able to apply it and identify the pattern that classifies a language. I think that the way he's thinking now is that language is made of syntax and semantics, and I guess semantics. If semantics is inside language, then all the meanings of such description, if you are describing something, then these things are inside your language, right? If the language has meaning. So if it has meaning, then those things are inside the language. They are within the set that you call a language. But I would never use that terminology. I'm still confused by it, I think. In response to Berkeley and Hume, so this is the part where he mentions Berkeley. So I'm just going to read that again. I was already on the priori, right? And in response to Berkeley, Hume Kant asserted that the unprimed cognition, which remains when perceptual content is subtracted has intrinsic structure that exists prior to content. It comprises that a priori categories of perceptual or phenomenal reality. Okay. Unfortunately, subtracting perception according to Kantian rules yields more than unprimed cognition. It also yields noumena, absolute objects or things in themselves. On one side of the result is a perceptual isomorphism between the mind and phenomenal reality. On the other, yawns a chasm on the far side of which sits an unknowable but nonetheless fundamental nominal reality. We have to research what noumena is. Let's see. I've heard of it before. Maybe Wikipedia can help us. Wow, man, my voice is really troubled today. The noumenon is a posted object or event that exists without sense or perception. The term noumenon is generally used in contrast with or in relation to phenomenon. So that's, noumenon, phenomenon, which refers to anything that can be apprehended by or is an object of the senses. Modern philosophy has generally been skeptical of the possibility of knowledge independent of the senses, and Immanuel Kant gave this point of view its canonical expression, that the nominal world may exist, but it is completely unknowable through human sensation. In Kantian philosophy, the unknowable nominal is often linked to the unknowable thing in itself. In Kant's German, that's Ding an sich, although how to characterize the nature of a relationship is a question yet open to some controversy. Let's see on Kant's usage of the term. I hate the idea of Platonic forms. I think that is an impression that we got from Plato. Theory of forms, okay. Maybe it's related, so I just have to look at it. It doesn't mention forms. It's mostly about ideas. Evidence of forms, self-criticism, Aristotelian criticism. Okay, dialogues that discuss forms. So it's in the book called The Republic of Plato. Page 402, 403, and then page 472, 483, page 500, 517, and a metaphor of the sun. The sun is to sight as good is to understanding. And allegory of the cave, the struggle to understand forms like man in cave guessing at shadows in firelight. And the Sophists also, which I read, page 146, true essence, a form, effective solution to participation problem. Page 151, the problem with being as a form. If it's participatory, then non-being must exist and be being. What? And be being. And if it is a participatory, then non-being must exist and be being. So existence can't be a form. That's the argument. All right. Let's see Kant's usage of nominal. Many accounts of Kant's philosophy treat nominal and thing in itself as synonymous, and there is textual evidence for this relationship. Kant also makes a distinction between positive and negative nominal. If by nominal we mean a thing so far as it is not an object of our sensible intuition, and so abstract from our mode of intuiting that this is a nominal in the negative sense of the term. But if we understand by it an object for a non-sensible intuition, we thereby presuppose a special mode of intuition, namely the intellectual, which is not that which we possess, and of which we cannot comprehend even the possibility. This would be nominal in the positive sense of the term. The nominum as a limiting concept. So, nominal and the thing in itself, positive and negative nominal as a limiting concept, and the dual object and dual aspect interpretations. I don't know much about Kant, so I'm just going to go ahead here. So in response to Berkeley, so he mentions Berkeley, right? Oh, maybe I skipped some pages here. Right, let me go again. Although insights regarding the ideal and our perceptual basis, we have to read this like at least 5 times anyway, so no problem, right? Although insights regarding the ideal and or perceptual or perceptual basis of reality go back millennia, we may as well start with some there. Okay, so there's a mistake here. We may as well start with some of their more recent proponents for the sake of continuity. Okay. First, Descartes posed that reality is mental in the sense of rationalism, but contradicted his own thesis by introducing mind-body dualism, the notion that mind and matter are reducibly separate. The empiricist Berkeley then said that reality is perceptual in nature, a kind of intersect of mind and matter. This can be seen by mentally subtracting perception from one's conceptual reality. What remains is pure subjective cognition, but without any objective grist for the perceptual mill. So, is that it? Is that all he's going to talk about, Berkeley? Empiricist Berkeley then said that reality is perceptual in nature, the kind of intersect of mind and matter. This can be seen by mentally subtracting perception from one's conception of reality. What remains is pure subjective cognition, but without any objective grist for the perceptual mill. Although attempts to cognitively subtract cognition from reality are far more common, they are a bit like trying to show that a sponge is not inherently wet, while immersing it in water, and can never be successful on the part of cognitive entities. And then he goes on to talk about Hume. Alright? In response to Berkeley and Hume, Kant asserted, the problem here, I guess, is that he likes Kant a lot for some reason. On one side of the result is a perceptual isomorphism between the mind and phenomenon reality. Okay, I read that. However, Kant's chiasm is so deep in mind and so fully interdicts any mind-reality isomorphism that it precludes causal efficacy and, for that matter, any other comprehensible principle of correspondence. This implies that noumena are both rationally and empirically relevant to cognitive and perceptual reality, and thus that they can be safely eliminated from reality theory. Okay, so he doesn't like Kant. I'm sorry. Yeah, I knew this already. Whatever Kant had in mind, he's going to say that in a minute. Whatever Kant had in mind when he introduced the concept of a phenomenon, his definition essentially amounts to inconceivable concept, but is thus an oxymoron. Yeah. Nomenon seems to be something that the Kantian usage of nomenon seems to be something very different from that of the Greeks. You know, the Greeks used phenomenon and nomenon. The Greeks had a binary way of thinking, man. That is good, right? And this implies that nomenon are okay. So it's not this one. Oxymoron, yeah. Whatever he really meant, we must rely on something other than Kantian metaphysics to find it. Thus far, we have managed to narrow reality down to the phenomenal reality studied by science, a combination of perceptual content and rational principles of cognition. A scientist employs empirical methods to make specific observations, applies general cognitive relationships from logic mathematics in order to explain them, and comes off treating reality as a blend of perception and cognition. This treatment lacks anything resembling an explicit justification. When a set of observations is explained with a likely set of equations interpreted therein, the adhesion between explanandum and explanation might as well be provided by rubber cement. An example, scientific explanations and interpretations glue observations and equations together in a very poorly understood way. It often works like a charm, but why?
One of the main purpose of reality theory is to answer this question. The first thing to notice about this question is that it involves the process of attribution, and that the rules of attribution are set forth in stages by mathematical logic. The first stage is called sentential logic and contains the rules for ascribing the attributes true or false. So, alright, so sentential logic, I have to write that because I need to look it up later. Just a moment. Just take a 10 seconds break. Alright, there it is. Oh, sorry. Respectively denoting inclusion or non-inclusion in arbitrary cognitive perceptual systems to hypothetical relationships in which predicates are linked by the logical functors. Yeah, functors, I don't know what that is. Not, the functors are not and or, and not and or implies and if and only if. Sentential logic defines these functors as true functions assigning true values to such expressions irrespective of the contents, but not the true values of their predicates, thus effecting a circular definition of functors on true values and true values on functors. And okay, I think this is self-consistency, right? The next stage of attribution, predicate logic, ascribes specific properties to objects using quantifiers. And the final stage, model theory, comprises the rules for attributing complex relations of predicates to complex relations of objects. In example, theories to universe. In addition, the form of attribution called definition is explicated. He uses the word explicated in a theory-centric branch of logic called formalized theories, and the mechanics of functional attribution is treated in recursion theory. In sentential logic, a tautology is an expression of functor-related sentential variables that is always true, regardless of the true values assigned to its sentential variables themselves. A tautology has three key properties. It is universally syntactically true. Syntactically, wouldn't that be semantically? Okay, let's go on. It is universally syntactically true. He's using it like, I don't know if, okay, because I guess the syntax will define it, right? It is, the syntax of a tautology is always right, I guess. It is thus self-referential, and the semantics, okay, it's just another comment, and the semantics is the flexible part, I guess. So, I don't know. It is thus self-referential, true even of itself, and therefore closed under recursive self-composition. Yeah. And its implications remain consistent under inferential operations preserving these properties. That is, every tautology is a self-consistent circularity of universal scope, possessing validity by virtue of closure under self-composition, comprehensiveness, non-exclusion of truth, and consistency, freedom from irresolvable paradox. I guess, so a tautology is an essential part of people's beliefs, I guess, or maybe, yeah, is the main part of people's beliefs. That is, every tautology is a self-consistent circularity of universal scope. Yeah, I think so. But tautologies are not merely consistent unto themselves, and I guess tautologies are necessary for any computation, right? You have to start somewhere. But tautologies are not merely consistent unto themselves. They are mutually consistent under mutual composition, making sentential logic as much a self-consistent circularity of universal scope as any of its tautologies. Thus, sentential logic embodies two levels of tautology, one applying to expressions and one applying to theoretical systems thereof. Predicate logic then extends the tautology concept to cover the specific acts of attribution represented by formally anonymous sentential variables, and model theory goes on to encompass more complex acts of attribution involving more complex relationships.
Reality theory is about the stage of attribution in which two predicates analogous to true and false, namely real and unreal, are ascribed to various statements about the real universe. In this sense, it is closely related to sentential logic. In particular, sentential logic has four main properties to be emulated by reality theory. The first is absolute truth. As a formal definition of truth, it is true by definition. The other properties are closure, comprehensiveness, and consistency. So three properties: closure, comprehensiveness, and consistency. Logic is wholly based on and defined strictly within the bounds of cognition and perception. It applies to everything that can be coherently perceived or conceived, and it is by its very nature consistent, being designed in a way that precludes inconsistency. Okay, so tautology is logic is tautology, right? Then it is the basis of mathematics, being the means. Yeah, it is the basis of mathematics. That's a very beautiful sentence. Wow, man, it's good to know that someone with a very high IQ agrees with me. And it's so obvious, being the means by which propositions are stated, proved or disproved, and it is the core of science, underwriting the integrity of rational and empirical methodology. Even so-called non-standard logics, which is called modal logic, fuzzy logic, and many-valued logics, must be expressed in terms of fundamental two-valued logic to make sense. Yeah, eventually, right? So if you're describing, if you're teaching, if you're learning modal, fuzzy, or many-valued logics, you're learning in sentences that can be assigned true or false. In short, two-valued logic is something without which reality could not exist. If it were eliminated, then true and false, real and unreal, and existence and non-existence could not be distinguished, and the merest act of perception or cognition would be utterly impossible. Thus far, it has been widely assumed that... Okay, so let me just make a comment here. I talked about Turing machines rely on binary evaluations, and now Chris Langan seems to go further, and I agree with him. And it's that part of his theory that says that reality can be expressed in bits. I agree with it more now because I've just read it. So doesn't that make perception and cognition similar? That's my question. Existence and non-existence could not be distinguished, and the merest act of perception or cognition would be utterly impossible. Perception and cognition seem to be similar. How do you differentiate perception from cognition? How do you differentiate perception from computation done by a Turing machine? That's my question. And a Turing machine could be anything. Thus far, it has been widely assumed that reality theory can be sought by the same means as any other scientific theory. But this is not quite true, for while science uses the epistemological equivalent of magic glue to attach its theories to its observations, reality theory must give a recipe for the glue and justify the means of application. Okay, so the impression I get from Langan is that he's much smarter than... he's much... how to say... He's much more... I guess general than Berkeley. But I still like Berkeley, man, and I don't think I can judge it. I can judge those two people's right now. This is just an impression, right? Thus far, it has been widely assumed that reality theory can be sought by same means as any other scientific theory. But this is not quite true, for while science uses the epistemological equivalent of magic glue to attach its theories to its observations, reality theory must give a recipe for the glue and justify the means of application. Yeah. That is, reality theory must describe reality on a level that justifies science, and thus occupies a deeper level of explanation than science itself. I'm trying to understand this. It's an explanation of
Let me see if I can explain it this way. Suppose that you know that two things are related, and they are related in a way that they have some sort of symmetry, right? And they don't necessarily have a symmetry of form, but they have some symmetry. So they, at least in meaning, they have a symmetry, right? They can have they can have structures built on different elements, and one of these two things can be coded, can have some encryption, and I think that reality theory is the study that yields the explanation between two things, two isomorphic things. For example, there is an isomorphism between mathematics and programming language, and reality theory would be concerned on explaining how mathematics and programming language relate to each other. Thus far, it has been widely assumed that reality theory is very very recent. If I'm not mistaken, it's from the 80s or 70s or something. Thus far, it has been widely assumed that reality theory can be solved by the same means as any other scientific theory. But this is not quite true. For while science uses the epistemological equivalent of magic glue, okay, I read that, that is, reality theory must describe reality on a level that justifies science, and thus occupies a deeper level of explanation than science itself. So reality theory relies on logic itself, right? I guess I have to end this episode a little early because my voice is starting to fade even more. That is, reality theory must describe reality on a level that justifies science, and thus occupies a deeper level of explanation than science itself. Thus it relies on logic, which is a tautology. Does this mean that reality theory is mathematical? Yes. But since mathematics must be justified along with science, meta-mathematical would perhaps be a better description. And when all is said and done, this comes down to logic, pure and simple. Nice. Wow, man, I can see the future. I haven't read this. Or yeah, I have read this, but I don't remember. I really don't remember. This is a very long book. I'm only 3% in this book. It's a very, very long book. And when all is said and done, this comes down to logic, pure and simple. It follows that reality theory must take the form of an extended logic, in fact a limiting form of logic in which the relationship between theory and universe, until now an inexhaustible source of destructive model theoretic ambiguity, is at least reduced to dual aspect monic form. So you guys have to know what monic is. Right? Let me research that. Monic. So my idea here is to just go like 4 more minutes, and do a better Berkeley video tomorrow, because I'm only scratching the surface on Berkeley right now. Let's see. I can't rely on Wikipedia much. Let's see. What is monism? Okay, there it is, monism. Monism is the view that attributes oneness or singleness to a concept. Substance monism is the philosophical view that a variety of existing things can be explained in terms of a single reality or substance. So, is that the case of Berkeley then? Because he explains matter with a computer, right? He explains with the mind, which is the old term for computer. And
Another distinction is the difference between substance and existence monism, or stuff monism, and thing monism. Substance monism posits that only one kind of stuff, matter or mind, exists. Oh, there it is. There it is. And although many things may be made out of this stuff, existence monism posits that, strictly speaking, there exists only a single thing, the universe, which can only be artificially and arbitrarily divided into many things. Alright. As complexity rises and predicates, where was I? Okay. I guess monism corresponds to the opposite of dualism, when you can only have two or one thing, right? Dualism is like there is mind and there is body, and they are two different things, and that the Cartesian mistake. And monism is there it is. I just found it. Inexhaustible source of destructive model theoretic ambiguity. Okay, I read that. Is at least reduced to dual aspect monic form. It has two aspects, but it is monic. Short-circuiting the paradox of Cartesian dualism. Wow, man, I can see the future. And eliminating the epistemological gap between mind and matter, theory and universe. I can really, I can somehow predict what Chris is going to be saying, right? As complexity rises and predicates becomes theories, tautology and truth become harder to recognize. Because universality and specificity are at odds in practice, if not in principle, they are subject to a kind of logical decoherence associated with relational stratification. Because predicates are not always tautological, they are subject to various kinds of ambiguity. As they become increasingly specific and complex, it becomes harder to locally monitor the heritability of consistency and locally keep track of a true property in the course of attribution or even after the fact. Undecidability, LSAT intractability, and NP completeness. NP completeness is non-polynomial completeness. I don't know what LSAT is. I have to research that. Let's see. LSAT intractability, if I remember correctly. Let's see, I have to just search for LSAT and not having an explanation here. Law school admission test, I don't think that is. That is what I want. Maybe LSAT math. Okay, logical reasoning, analytical reasoning. Yeah, it seems to be about law school admission test. Right, never mind, right? Predicate ambiguity, and Lovenheim's column theory. Okay, let's search that. How long is this recording? Wow, 1 hour. Oh man, I stopped recording, man, what the hell? According to the nature, alright. Maybe I should stop here and listen to what I have recorded and maybe upload the video. Blah, blah, blah.